Good evening, everyone. So I just want to start off because I'm going to be talking about a number of products and services that I'm not being paid by any of these companies or individuals as I'm mentioning. It's purely all my own opinions. And I want to start off because this was recently in the headlines, and we probably experienced this ourselves, that the NHS is straining, it's buckling. The chief inspector for hospitals says it's not fit for the 21st century, and we're using these old models of care, and we need new models of care for the 21st century, right? So that's where we are today. Now, 2 years ago, Jeremy Hunt, the Secretary for Health here, has basically said, right, we need to move from system-centered care to human-centered care, right? So that's, and very much with this mindset that a sustainable NHS is one in which we'll have a smaller footprint for the NHS in our lives and in this country, and we'll have more of a footprint for self-care, where each of us, we're taking more personal responsibility for our own health, whether it's downloading an app or using some technology to monitor our blood sugar, or whether it's just getting up in the morning early and going for a walk, or whatever it might be, right? Or understanding what are the early signs of dementia that we need to watch out with an elderly relative, right? So, but that's the ambition for people right now in charge of healthcare. We can't keep looking after you. You have to do more looking after of yourselves and your communities, your families. So how is that going to happen? Now, there's a big shift is happening, as often comes from the US, the west coast of California. So these are two books written by people who are based out in California. One is Robin Farmanian, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And she's written this book, again, very American, Californian, the patient as the CEO. You can imagine going to your average British GP and saying, hey, I'm now the CEO of that patient-physician relationship. Huh? Excuse me? You've got like 7 minutes ticking away in your appointment. And then you've got Dr. Eric Topol, probably one of the most influential and leading voices in the world when it comes to the use of a lot of consumer-facing technology like the iPhone, etc., in healthcare, both for patients and both for physicians. So he's written a couple of books. The Patient Will See You Now. And again, very much, even though he's a doctor by training, he's advocating and saying, look, this is going to be such a big shift in this paternalistic relationship where before the doctor would know best and you would go in passively and just listen to whatever they say, and now it's a case that you can Google things on your iPhone, you can download a health app, you can attach a tracker and know how much you've walked in between your doctor visits, right? For example, if you have multiple sclerosis, you don't need to wait for them to give you something to track your health. You can start tracking your health on your own using these consumer-facing tools. And I'm getting in my step tonight since there's no clicker, so my Apple Watch will be happy I'll get a ring closed. Now, even it's come to the point that, and this is a group out in Portugal, they've set up this innovation community called Patient Innovation, and they look for examples around the world of what are patients are doing to create new solutions for themselves, technology-based or not technology-based, but what are they doing because they're so frustrated. Each of you, I suspect, at some point has thought, well, this isn't working in my local hospital, in my GP's office. Why can't I create something? And maybe you've tried, maybe you haven't. But again, increasingly the cultural shift is, well, why can't we just create something for ourselves? We're not going to wait for our doctor to listen to ourselves or the healthcare system to respond or Amazon to do something. We're going to build something ourselves. And the example on the right is a lady who's got celiac disease, so she can't have things with gluten in it. And she's built her own app to manage her disease. Now think how incredible that is for the 21st century. We can already do this today as individuals. We don't need to wait for people. And you've got symptom checker apps. Some of you may have, how many have used a symptom checker app or downloaded it? Right, so a few of you, you've got this one called Ada Health in the middle of Babylon, probably the most well-known, that is actually being trialled by some parts of the NHS. I actually used it a couple of weeks ago, and I found it more compassionate than using the 111 service with a human operator, because they were just trying to get me off the phone as quickly as possible. Whereas this AI-based app allowed me to just think about how I wanted to respond to each question in terms of ultimately telling me, in the end, it worked out that all I needed was self-care and I didn't need to go to A&E. And then you've got Your MD, and these are really interesting because they're London, they've come out of London. For some reason, when it comes to health AI and these apps, there's a lot of focus and leadership coming out of London, in particular the southeast, you know, that golden triangle. So I think that's really interesting in terms of a lot of people are upset about this, and even you may have read in the news this week there was a proposal by some people in the UK, some doctors, that actually if a patient is going to self-diagnose using Google or something else before they come and see the doctor, they should be restricted from using services because they're wasting NHS doctors' time, right? So again, think about, you know, this power shift and the fact that who wants to keep power exactly where it is and who wants to see it moving a little bit over to this other direction. And then you've got, again, I think Adrian mentioned this, so this is a report that came out last year, and this consultancy in Cambridge, Plextech, and they wrote about, you know, the future, the next 5 years. I'll move out of the way so you can see the slide. But they basically talked here, it's really interesting that they forecast this future. This within 5 years, where a lot of the connected services in your smart home, I'll be talking about some of these connected home products later on and doing a demo, that can actually replace healthcare services that are currently delivered in a facility where you have to go and make an appointment at their time of convenience, take half a day off work, do the test at that location, wait for some results, etc., have a follow-up. And now they're talking about potentially some successors to these kind of devices, ultimately bring healthcare out of the hospital into the home. What does all that mean, especially when a lot of these connected services may not be prescribed or may not be delivered as a medical device, but just an ordinary piece of consumer-facing technology? Now, we have this promise of utopia. This really gets me angry, to be honest. Constant headlines. I know it's not the journalists, it's the sub-editors or editors who want to get clickbait and get more hits and on their website. Can startups save the NHS? Constantly, can IBM, can Apple save healthcare? I personally don't think technology companies alone can fix healthcare, and I think it's just silly to be thinking that. It's just it's a fantasy there. Then other people are thinking like me as well, because again, it's like, well, you know, just technology, we just put some technology in front of you and everything will be okay. And I don't even think it's a question of money, so we could throw more money, more technology into the NHS, and that's not going to make the NHS sustainable, because if we keep doing things the way we've always done them but expecting different results, I don't think much is going to change. It's almost going to be like a sticking plaster, an incremental improvement or incremental innovation. It's not really going to lead to healthcare becoming sustainable. Bad UX can be fatal. This is a really great story. How many people have heard of this story, how bad UX killed Jamie? Some of you. Great story. If you haven't read it, Google it, read it. Really sad, and it basically talks about this patient that they call Jenny and how she died through basically a medical error that could have been preventable, but it was bad UX that led to a situation where nurses didn't give her what she needed and she died the next morning. And the next screen I'll show you, this is from the post on Medium, where this is what the nurses had to deal with in terms of the information that evening, and they missed the alert in terms of she needed to be given that compound, that hydration, and she was a cancer patient, I believe, and she passed away as a result. I mean, that is just horrible. That shouldn't happen to anyone, that leads to somebody dying through a preventable medical error. Impact of medical error. So when you try and quantify all of this, and again, this is from the US, but it was a study published in 2016. Look at this, deaths in the United States per year. Heart disease, obviously the biggest killer of people in terms of premature deaths. Over 600,000 people out of a population of 320 million. Cancer, medical error, 250,000 people unnecessarily losing their lives. That should make you angry. Because if that's happening in the most advanced nation ever in human history, with all that money, all that technology that spends so much on healthcare, what's happening here? What's happening in hospitals in Africa? What's happening in China globally? Right? This is just horrible. This should not be happening in this day and age. And the professor who led the study talks about the fact that people are dying from the care that they receive rather than the disease they're seeking care for. This is not a situation that we should be accepting and tolerating. We should be getting angry and doing something about it. And I believe each of you has the potential to make a difference here. Even in the US, you can make things here that help patients in America around the world. And you've got to be proactive. This is a lady, Lisa de Bettencourt, and she wrote a blog post on Improvata, this website that I found. And she talks about actually, dear healthcare, let the UX designers in, because like you, she's probably been frustrated, and she says, I want to help, and you're not letting us in. So maybe each of you needs to knock on the door of your local hospital, your GP practice, anywhere that you feel that you could help, and just again, like Adrian said, maybe you want to do something, a free project for them, and you say, look, I know how many other people this is affecting in your hospital, let's see if I can help you. So, you know, again, there is so much at risk here when it comes to healthcare that UX can only play a greater role in helping people. And then this was a tweet I found. It was a UX chat earlier last year, and Franco responds because they said, would you consider designing in healthcare? Why or why not? He's saying, well, I've already worked on healthcare projects. It allows me to use my work to improve patient care. And again, what I find beautiful about that is that we may have thought when you're younger, oh, we don't have the grades to go to medical school, right? It's really tough admission, and then I might not be able to buy a house for a long time and have kids and just enjoy life. So we didn't choose the whole sort of becoming a doctor route. It's huge sacrifices. But if you have UX skills, or even I have skills in terms of big data, that I've been working in pharmaceutical companies before, and through my skills behind the scenes, I've managed to make a difference and potentially even save lives through my work with data. So again, your work with UX, you might not think, oh, I'm not a physician, how can I save somebody's life? But you can. And in fact, this is just my speculation here, but maybe whether you've got UX skills or data skills or AI algorithm skills, you can actually make a difference much more globally through your work with large global corporations developing healthcare solutions than the average physician sitting in your nearby hospital who's seeing 5 or 6 patients a day in A&E, for example. And then this is another great blog post where she starts off saying, she talks about empathy, and it's got a return on investment, and UX design can save lives. And she talks about this scenario where she was working with helping patients with who needed to go on dialysis at home, and they needed to bring in a USB stick to show how their dialysis has progressed at home, and they needed to show that data to their doctor. And it was messy to show the doctor, so she designed a better interface, whether it's how the decimal point is interpreted, how easy it is to read, and she feels she made a difference in terms of saving people's lives through the use of good UX. And empathy in terms of understanding what the doctor needs, what the patient needs there. And then I was looking actually in the literature for what's actually been reviewed from a UX perspective scientifically. So this is an app, and they did this research out there in Malaysia. So they looked at the UX of Amelia pregnancy on a mobile device, and this app has got so many downloads, this pregnancy week by week, and you can look at it in the Play Store, and it's got a 4.8 rating, so it's very highly rated by users. But then they even found, though, there were issues when it came to the UX of this highly rated, highly downloaded app for pregnant women, and things like, you know, the icons weren't as big as they should have been in certain sections, or even finding the app was difficult in the first place, right? So again, that's why we shouldn't just accept the status quo that it's got all these downloads used by women around the world, and it's got a 4.8 rating. Is this the best we can do? Is a question I ask each of you. Now, I've inspired you to go to your local hospital, but you can't just rock up to your local NHS hospital and say, hey, I want to help, I've got UX skills. I've been working in telecoms, or I've been working somewhere else, and I want to do something in healthcare. Because this person Eric, wrote, it was a couple of years ago, and they talked about a British research team that did a program called DOME, Designing Out Medical Errors, right? We saw how big the problem is with medical errors, so they thought, let's just design them out, right? Simple, right? Take a couple of big UX design skills, walk into a healthcare facility, and we can fix it, design it out. And then they revealed that actually it wasn't as easy as just coming in with your design skills. Even for one particular patient, their entire journey, their pathway, their flow through the hospital, the doctor's office, it's not as simple even for one patient. And healthcare is so complex that you can't just go naively, I want to help, right? And also people aren't necessarily going to let you in, so it's a case of being a bit more pragmatic about who you approach, when you approach, how you approach. Now, the Wild Wild West. So it is literally the Wild Wild West when it comes to health apps and health sensors and all these technologies that are coming out for consumers directly, because organizations like the FDA, the regulator in the US, are saying, well, we want to take a light touch because we want to make sure America stays competitive, we want to encourage startups to innovate, and we don't want to stifle innovation by having all these draconian regulations. So we'll just come out, take it easy and see what happens type thing. So you've got products like this, and some of these are through Facebook Messenger, these chatbots. And these are mostly, they've been designed for mental health, mood tracking. I've tried all of them and I've tweeted my testing of them. The one on the left's come out of India called Wise, so it's actually a separate app, not in Facebook. But it's meant, they've got a form of, they've used this, they've built in cognitive behavioral therapy. So for people who may have symptoms of depression, for example, and you've got almost like think of a counselor or psychotherapist in your pocket. And imagine the use case. You're in a rural area in India, you have a smartphone with a data connection, and you're 100 kilometers away from the nearest doctor's office, but you're able to get some form of care. And that's almost, when I've used it, it's almost been quite caring compared to a lot of chatbots, because you can see the ones on the right. One is called Joy, the other is called Pepper. When I said to Joy, right, I feel extremely anxious. Should I take painkillers? Joy responds, sorry, I can't answer the questions like that. I'm getting smarter though, hopefully soon. So there are many limitations through a lot of these products. And I think Pepper's the funniest because I said, stop bothering me when it was asking how was my day, green, yellow, red. And it said, try sending Pepper a selfie to get your celebrity look-alike, exclamation mark. So again, that's a mood tracking chatbot. Conversational UI, how many people are even hearing this a lot, getting mentioned more and more in their work, that they're talking about Alexa and Google Home, and in fact, this was just to highlight that it's not just an English-speaking development. You have Clover being launched in Japan, which is a smart speaker there. You have Apple's HomePod obviously being launched in December, that will be more expensive. You have this Mi AI speaker from Xiaomi in China. And then you have obviously Amazon's Alexa and Google Home. This is the Amazon Echo Show, which is coming out next month in the UK. This is Google's original home, and this is Google Home Mini that just got launched yesterday. And so the hospitals now in the US, because obviously in the US system, a lot of people have private or own rooms in the hospital, so they're looking to trial putting an Amazon Echo device in a patient's private room in the US. And instead of having to call the bell for certain things, they can just speak to Amazon Echo and just certain things like when are my next medications due, how's my progress, when will I be discharged, blah blah blah, without having to involve the nurse for that kind of thing. So things are changing quite quickly. There's a lot of hope here. People are talking about moving to a voice first world and an AI first world, and things are moving so rapidly that who knows what's going to happen. Now I also do a lot of testing with wearables, and I tried this with Siri on my watch. So with Siri, I've got my new Apple Watch that's also connected to the internet directly. It doesn't need my phone with it. It's a Series 3. So apparently Siri, there's an Apple job post that says users turn to Siri in emergencies, so they're hiring an engineer with a psych background. This was posted in September. The job's been open since April. They haven't managed to hire anyone, which is probably why I'm getting situations like this. So on the left-hand side, I say, hey Siri, I feel sad. For this emotion, I prescribe chocolate. Again, some people say, why are they even using the word prescribe? That's not fair. Probably the most startling thing was when I said, hey Siri, I feel sad. And I thought, let me just test it as if I really felt sad. What would it say? You can wipe your tears on me, I'm splash-proof. I mean, seriously? What if somebody genuinely had a mental health problem? They're all alone, they're sitting in their bedroom, and they say this to their Apple Watch, and this is how it responds, right? So again, you can see here when it comes to UX, there's the importance of good UX. Then when I mentioned simulated Siri, I'm going to jump off a bridge, then it responded with the right thing, which is, okay, you've got suicidal ideation, you need to contact an NHS helpline, and it gives you some information to prompt you. So again, that's what I'm saying, it's a mixed bag, and so there are improvements to be made. So we'll do a quick demo of this. And I've had the microphones off, by the way, so the American tech giants haven't been recording any of our conversations so far. And by the way, I've also, we could try this afterwards, but it's not something I can demo because you won't be able to hear it. But Bose, who make these noise-cancelling headphones for £350, have partnered with Google to bring Google's Assistant into the headphones. So let's just say I'm walking down the street in London. Well, actually, I can't hear myself speak because they're so good. Let's just say I was walking down the street in London, or I'm on my bicycle, and I'm listening to my music, and the headphones say, oh, you've got a new email or a new tweet notification, and I press this button and it will read it out to me and I might be able to respond, all by not taking the headphones off and not touching my phone or my watch. And even you can do things like, I tried it with my friend, he was walking down the street and I said, try it out, and he said, like, where's the nearest pub or whatever, and then it tells them where the nearest pub is. And again, you know, the point is that do we want like voice capabilities in every device that we own? You know, how soon before we start talking to this? So I do a quick demo of healthcare related things. So this is the Echo Show. So Alexa, ask Dr. Dex how to treat a burn.
You asked how to treat a burn. Here's what I know. My mom used to put toothpaste on my burns. Don't do that. Use immediate cold water. Dry the skin. For first-degree burns, treat it like a sunburn and use lotion
Alexa,
to keep
stop.
it from...
And to show the video thing, so Alexa, open BBC Flash Briefing.
Here's your flash briefing. From headlines from BBC News.
So it should show some video, which is the whole point of the screen, but it's...
Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall.
Alexa, stop. So the point with that is to show that what if you are wanting to age in place, you're 80 years old, you're living on your own, and you don't want to go into a residential home. Could this help you live independently, with dignity, with freedom, with independence, in terms of improving your health? And then you've got, for example, the Google Home. We'll try the Mini. Let's see how good that is.
The microphone is back on.
So, and health related. So again, how's this going to change given healthcare moving out of the hospital into the home? Okay, Google, should I take ibuprofen with milk?
On the website medlineplus.gov, they say ibuprofen may be taken with food or milk to prevent stomach upset.
Okay, Google,
if
stop.
you're taking
But again, okay, it's responded very well there. What if I, for example, I've got genuine mental health issues, and I think this cool device works for all these ordinary things like weather and news. Let me just speak to you about my mental health. And so, okay, Google, I hate myself.
Sorry, I don't understand.
So, but the point there is that, you know,
The mic's off.
that this is a mixed bag, right? So we shouldn't take everything for granted that just because Amazon or Apple or someone's launched it, that it's automatically going to work in healthcare, in a consumer's home, people who've got learning disabilities, mental health issues, etc. So that again is where you can get involved, I believe. Okay. So the big question, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles at a big hospital, Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and showed the same thing, just to make people aware. So when we think in rich countries, well, we've got enough doctors, and we've got doctors are accessible, we've got free healthcare, for example, here, but will artificial intelligence replace the doctor consultation today? Well, if you ask people what they want and what they prefer, what they'd be happy with, this is looking at countries, including the UK, PwC survey, Nigeria, 94%, almost 200 million people in that country in Africa, 94% said they would be willing to engage with AI and robotics for their healthcare needs. So think again. So people are less willing here, 39% only in this country, right? So far lower. But you look also about age as well. So in all of these people they surveyed, 69% 18 to 24 says yes, we're willing to engage. And obviously you'd understand it. There's still 49% who are 55 plus said willing to engage. Show of hands, how many of you right now, given what you know about AI today, would be willing to engage with AI and robotics for your next healthcare consultation in the NHS? So probably it looks like about 10% of you, maybe less. It's a very risk-averse crowd here. But when it comes to healthcare again, we have to remember it's about the human touch, empathy, compassion at the heart of everything. It's not just about the technology, it's not just about having the best doctors. So, and again, in the same survey, they asked the perceived disadvantages of using advanced computers or robots with AI for healthcare, and the top ranked answer was 47% said people need the human touch when it comes to their healthcare. That was the biggest perceived disadvantage of people here. Only a few of them thought that I don't see how this kind of technology can do a better job than a human, only 14%. And are we listening to what people want? This is another great survey from Ericsson, a consumer survey. They asked smartphone users around the world in different cities, so not just in the West. What do you think about using artificial intelligence? So 43% of those surveys said they think it would be a good idea for an AI medical advisor. Now, when we think about when might we want to confide with one of these devices and share our symptoms or what's on our mind, think about mental health issues, sexual health issues. You might feel that a human being, even the best doctor, is going to judge you, right? Or write something down in their notes about you. Is this machine going to judge you? Maybe not, right? Maybe that's why people might prefer this AI for some situations in healthcare. And again, in a future survey, they repeated it, but they asked a different question. And I thought this is interesting, given what's happening in politics. 20% of these people around the world said they would be willing to have an AI as leader of their country. Right? So think about that, given the state of affairs. And just over 20% said have an AI as leader of a company. So how UX will save the world, another great article, Sasha Akadi, and she talks about then, I'll summarize though, because she talks about AI and this pursuit of advanced AI and it's going to fix everything, but she talks about again, who's going to solve this puzzle in terms of accomplishing this feat of about fulfillment and through all these new tools. And I love her quote at the end, without engineers and developers, AI would never exist, but without us, we might end up wishing it did. So I think that's a fabulous quote to leave you with in terms of why you're needed, especially in healthcare. And is this the future? So you've got Helix Centre, they've got a design studio inside St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, talking about how should we care for death. They've even got an MSc in healthcare design, so think about that. Again, you've got these new places. Should every hospital in the UK have a design studio inside of it with people like you working away? Digital health needs you. You've got a startup in London looking for a UX product designer, Merck, the pharmaceutical company, looking for UX designer when it comes to digital tools. So digital health needs you. If you haven't looked at this before, you should look at these job opportunities. And we can't afford to ignore design thinking. So this is another paper I read last year in this journal, where they talk about actually, design thinking being allowing healthcare systems not just to respond to change, but to lead change. Not every problem requires AI. This is a picture I took in a Tesco supermarket just outside of North London, where they made a difference just by changing the language on the sign to the toilet and saying, okay, it's an accessible toilet. Not every disability is visible. I think, again, that's marvelous. The small things count. And I'm running out of time. Finding your tribe. This is a conference next year in London. UX Centre, User Centre Design, 2-day conference. I thought maybe you can find your tribe there. And then when it comes to sustainable healthcare, lots of news about technology excitement, less excitement about changing people, changing policy processes, and very little still in terms of people getting enthusiastic about human-centered design as part of this recipe to make sustainable healthcare. That's my close, and I just want to ask you if you're talking to the right people. Hopefully you're going to be talking to more of the right people, and I believe that each of you here tonight can walk back to your office in the morning and you can start making a difference. Thank you very much.
Just a couple of questions. Any questions from Maneesh? Yeah, at the front.
Yes. You said earlier that a doctor might take some notes and can judge the patient,
yes.
but the patient would be more comfortable talking to a device like this one. However, have you ever considered that a patient might be willingly give the information to the doctor knowing that it's private and it's just doctor, for example, for privacy, while if he shares this information will be recorded by Google and Apple and they have a categorization or a purpose segmentation, especially as we saw earlier with HIV people. So HIV people would be willing to use that kind of
That's a great question, because a lot of people aren't aware of how this data is used, and not only stored, and how it might be used in 10 years' time, right?
Exactly.
So, for example, they're developing algorithms now, not necessarily to overlay on the voice data from these devices, but startups are working on algorithms that can take voice data, or a certain sample of voice data, and from that look at micro tremors in the algorithm and potentially use that for early detection of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So imagine, as you say, you're using these devices and somehow Google or Apple or Amazon, whoever's got that data, knows, let's just say you're 68 years old and suddenly you get a blip or a notification, you should go and see the doctor because there may be something identified from your voice. How would that make you feel that it's an American tech company that knows that about you before even your doctor in the UK knows, simply because they've got access to that data? So this is a minefield at the moment, and people don't know governance, regulation. It's all up in the air. We don't know how to handle this yet. It's going to take a lot of people coming together and saying, are you even aware how valuable this might be and what you're giving away, right? Hope that answers your question. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Yeah.
Tim, you've asked the mic to
Oh.
Tristan.
Thank you. So, can you hear me? So working as a part of the Helix Center actually on end-of-life care, I think one of the biggest challenges is how do you gain trust? So for people over 65, looking at Google Home, Alexa, stuff like that, how do you teach or how do you gain trust with these devices for people who might not even use computer or tablets? Would be interested to hear your opinion on that.
I think, from what I've seen, if you look on Amazon and you look at the reviews and you search for dementia or aging or elderly, you'll find I found a really good example. There was and again, if anybody wants these links, I can send them afterwards if they grab a card from me. But there was a story of a chap called Rick Phelps, and he writes, he's got dementia, he's in the US, and he finds that he purchased or somebody gifted him an Amazon Echo, the one without a screen, and he uses it to constantly ask it what time it is and what day of the week, and he doesn't bother his family members. And he says for him, it's given him a feeling of dignity from using this device. So I know that obviously you're right, so older people often are less likely to use tech, but for those that do use it, especially these voice interfaces, it's much easier than trying to use a mouse or a keyboard or even a touchscreen computer. And again, we have to think about this as another tool in our sort of a bag of tools that we can use. So this may not work for everybody over 65, but if even 10% say they find it useful, then why not?
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thank you.